Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Emerald, Doctor of Chiropractic, and
This is Painting Wellness, and I'm Kat Garcia, licensed professional counselor. And today we are going to talk about TikTok. Not TikTok, but talk, like TALK. TikTok. Talk. Yes.
yes.
Yes. And we want to make sure that if you want to hear more about our topics or anything we talk about, make sure to click the follow button. And you can hear us on all major streaming and on YouTube. So, yeah.
So this is going to be a episode focused probably more, we were discussing if we should tell people, the audience, on this, but this is going to be likely for parents and caregivers, because with this TikTok, we're actually going to be talking mostly, well, all about vocal and physical Tourette's or tics that people have. And so we're hoping that you get a lot of information on this one, because it's kind of like feels like a growing thing within adolescence that then can evolve into something that you or an adult would be having as well.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I've noticed is, in the mental health field, we do manage a lot of Tourette's, and I think Tourette's has been something that has been getting a lot of attention lately because of some TikTokers that put themselves out there that have pretty strong tics. And I think some people think that they're lying or whatever, which is really sad because, people that suffer from Tourette's or any kind of tic can't really help it.
Yeah.
I think that that's really brought forth, hey, what is Tourette's? What are tics? And these people are really trying to educate the population. So this is something that I think it's always been around, but I think it's getting a lot more attention now.
Yeah, well, and a lot more, we'll say, attention in a way that gives a better understanding of what it is, instead of, like, I would say, as when I was growing up, the understanding, it was like the butt of a joke.
Correct.
Like, it was a character in a movie that had Tourette's or a tic, and they, like, the joke was always on them, type of a deal. Correct. Where now it's shifting. I'm like, hey, this is what this is, and here's more education on that. And so we're going to be discussing that and going through and talking more about what tics and Tourette's can be, because it's estimated around like 11 to 20% of adolescents have some sort of physical or vocal tic, which could be like it's an involuntary movement, a rhythmic movement, or even a vocalization that they just can't help, that happens without them actually trying to do. I can't say that I've ever had a tic, but I could certainly understand how that could be really frustrating to have to deal with, especially, in school with just all of your peers. If you have anything different that someone or a group of people decide that is not okay, that can be really distressing. That can be hard emotionally and mentally, as well as like uncomfortable to have to deal with.
And then you have, it's distracting.
Mm-hmm.
It's very distracting. And I think that, it's important to say that in tics do not only stem from Tourette's. There are medical conditions that cause tics, or any kind of involuntary movement, and it can also be caused by anxiety. It could be caused by what am I trying to, like, some injuries. It could be caused by, so tics can come from a lot of different places, and they can it's a huge spectrum, from anything like stuttering to all the way to like a big violent movements or loud screaming or things like that. So it's a huge spectrum.
Yeah, and it can show up at different, as you said, at different times, different environments, and someone may go through a period where they're having more, we'll say, like vocal tics, and then they may not have those for a while, and they can come up in those different situations. So I think that's a great point of, like, this is a large spectrum.
Yep.
And definitely still, like, getting a better understanding as a community and a medical, scope of, like, how to effectively, quote unquote, treat or manage these type of things. So, as theoretically the parent or the caregiver listening to this, we can also understand, like, that could be hard, like managing that and understanding for the child, like, this is not something that they're wanting to do to upset or to act out or anything.
Yeah.
And so that can be hard for the caregiver to manage these type of things. And we also just want to recognize you, that you're putting the time in, you're researching, you're understanding these type of things so that you can help the child progress through this as effectively as possible. And that's a really big thing, because obviously the kid doesn't know. The kid is just going through life and doing what they can do as best they can.
Yeah. I think one of the big things that, as you say, that comes up for me is this idea of perhaps a parent that is seeking help because they have noticed that their kid has a tic, or their teenager has a tic, or even maybe themselves. And that maybe if they go to a provider that doesn't maybe realize that it's a tic, or does not assess further, and all of a sudden you are trying to manage a tic as if it's a behavioral issue.
Yeah.
And how frustrating it can be. And how frustrating it can be not only for the parent, but also for the child. Like, I'm not doing this for attention, or I'm not doing this to be upset, or I'm not doing whatever. It's it can literally be a response that to deregulation. And honestly, in my experience, when somebody has something like Tourette's or any kind of tic, if they become more anxious, or if they're not feeling well, the tics actually get worse. They intensify. So, I mean, as parents, it's really hard, and parents are not alone out there. There's a lot of support groups. There's a lot of information, and it's important to do the research. If you think that your child has some sort of tic, do the research and try to advocate, because it's not always behavioral.
Yeah, and as you're advocating for yourself and for your family, if you talk to a provider and they kind of just say it's not a big deal, or they'll grow out of it, like dismissive, go somewhere else. Like, get a second opinion. I would say that I'm starting to become much more vocal on this idea of, it's not just about they'll grow out of it. Like, if it's a concern and it's something that you and your family are working through, you deserve more information and making sure that your concerns are heard.
Yeah,
and
validation. Because honestly, even if it were something that they were going to outgrow, being invalidated when you're concerned, saying and dismissed, saying if they're going to grow out of it, that doesn't help you right now.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I mean, I think seek out support. There's a lot of organizations out there with a lot of information, and there are most definitely providers that do understand Tourette's or any kind of tic. So that's really important. One of the things I always wonder, because I'm not obviously I'm not a psychiatric provider, so I don't prescribe medication, is I do have clients that get on psychiatric medications or other medications, and their tics become more exacerbated. And so I always wonder, are there interventions that perhaps you as a chiropractor do to help those tics? I mean, is there something, knowing that we like to have a lot of Eastern medicine involvement, if somebody wants to say, okay, well, I'm going to try something natural or less invasive for my tics, is there something you can do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, coming from my standpoint, I generally recommend that we go from less invasive to more invasive on that spectrum, because there are times that you do need to have medication, or for another condition that, and you'll see your primary care, your doctor for that would be prescribing, those type of medications. But as far as like on my end of things, yeah, I don't prescribe any medication. I'm very focused as a chiropractor on non-invasive techniques. So generally that's adjusting. That's a big piece, where we are adjusting the spine to help the nervous system, so your brain, communicate with the rest of the body. And that's one of the things that I get really excited about when talking with individuals and families is, hey, if there is a miscommunication between the brain and, say, the muscle, where it could be like a head twitch or a head bob or something like that, if there's miscommunication going on there, that could be the root cause of this tic. And so if we can help kind of allow that communication to facilitate more effectively, maybe we can have some resolvement of that. That's what the hope would be, at least in the beginning. And there's been some cool research and case studies showing that people that have been under chiropractic care do get either partial or full resolvement of these type of ticks, which
That's
is
amazing.
really exciting, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say like every person that has a tick is going to get resolvement or like no longer have it, but it's certainly something to check out and look at. And the big piece when I'm taking a look at it that I'm thinking about is if you had talked about if someone is feeling dysregulated, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling like their body is just out of sorts, and that's when their tics start to really come to the forefront, then I would certainly say, hey, let's get you in and see if that's something like chiropractic could help with, because what we're looking to do is to calm that system down. Also, let's say you do have a shoulder tick or a neck tick that it's really uncomfortable in that area. Well, even at the minimum, let's make sure that those muscles are like more comfortable. So even if you still are working through that, your body is more comfortable. So there's a lot of different layers on that. But we want to make sure that really ultimately that the brain is doing what it's needing to do.
Yeah. And I think, this is where, you and I talk a lot about the mind-body connection. And so even if there was a tick that was not necessarily, cannot necessarily be repaired or reversed with chiropractic, we know that tics cause a lot of tension and embarrassment. And where do we hold all that? In our body.
Yeah.
And so when we don't feel good, what happens? Tics get more evident or more prominent. And so being able to take care of our body may not repair the tick, but it more than likely will help you not feel so tense, and maybe the tick will diminish just by the effect of being taken care of, and the body being taken care of, because our body is such a powerful machine. And ticks that are outside of the diagnoses of Tourette's, let's say a tick that is associated to anxiety. Again, we talk about how absolutely taking care of your body when it's anxious and you're all like tense can help anxiety go down, and again those tics go down. And when we talk about tics associated with anxiety, it's really important that I think sometimes when we think about tics, we're thinking about like I said, like yelling or things like that. But one very, very common tick, which a lot of people have and they don't even recognize, is the whole shaking of the leg. And I mean, and you're just shaking everywhere you are, you're just shaking your leg. You're shaking your leg. That is actually a tick. That's a nervous tick, right? I mean, it's behaviors that are like that you do over and over again that are attached to your anxiety. I know that when I get really, really anxious, I stutter, and that's a tick. Like that's a, I don't stutter normally, so that's like a nervous tick, right? Do you have any nervous ticks? Is that something like? I know that I've had my eye twitch before.
One of the things that I find myself doing is, we were talking earlier about, I get nervous with testing. That is my like when my anxiety tends to go up the most. And what I've noticed is I will start doing something with my hands to try to self-soothe or just a repetitive motion that would be a tick.
The pen clicking?
Not necessarily pen clicking. It's just something like a repetitive motion that I think the noise, the click itself is soothing, and it's resetting something in my brain. And I apologize to all of my previous classmates because that was probably super annoying.
I used to do the clicking. That's why
clicking,
I asked.
yeah.
And people were like, "Can you stop clicking?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? What do you mean with the clicking going on?" So I get that.
Yeah, it's that pattern of helping soothe, and I do like anecdotal, yeah, that word.
Anecdotal.
I started getting adjusted in like during a seminar that I got adjusted at a break in a seminar, and it reset just my anxiety levels and started settling me down, and I didn't have that drive anymore. Now, was that because I was more aware of doing the tick? A lot of different things, but it was just a really cool thing of, a reminder that when our nervous system is able to calm down and our body is able to relax, our anxiety goes down, that these things kind of melt away. And I think that's a big piece in overall what we discuss is when we do things that are proactive and increase health, a lot of these other things disappear because our body is able to function the way it should, or ideally would like to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important. We talk, and again, we talk a lot about just being aware and advocating and those things, and it's really, really important that we are very mindful about ourselves and our children so we can observe, because I think a lot of times as parents, for no negative reason, but we're just very distracted and we're trying to get the kids off to school and all the things, and sometimes, like I said, we might be distracted. We think that it's a behavioral issue, and we don't recognize how much trouble it's causing our children until maybe the teacher contacts us. So, I want to encourage all the parents to just, if you just pay attention, like observe, because we spend so much of our time not being mindful. And again, and if you have a tick, then be mindful about the people around you so you can maybe tell, I've had clients that say, hey, just FYI, I have this tick. So this happens or that happens. I'm like, okay, that's good. I'm glad, because it could appear, depending on the tick, that they're having some sort of seizure or something like that. So, so being mindful about that also helps you work on that and be very aware of your body, especially if you have like big ticks, like movements and things like that. So, I think it's a nervous system thing, regardless whether it's caused by like a permanent tick or by anxiety, right? And so, what do you think is the biggest thing? Let's say that they get adjusted, but it's not something that can necessarily be reversed with chiropractic. Is there a specific thing that you would recommend to help like stretch spine or something like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the big one I want to clarify too, when I'm adjusting or any chiropractor, we are not necessarily treating ticks. We are adjusting the spine, and through the nervous system being able to function more effectively, these things we like to see them go away. That's the hope. But some other things that would help is, especially if it's like a physical roll movement, getting more motion into that area. So finding something that you really enjoy, like an exercise. I personally really like rock climbing because I think there's a lot of actually great neurological stimulation that goes with that, especially for kids. That already for like we'll touch on for male kids, boys, that their brain and their body just needs so much motion in order to get those neurological connections, that by allowing them to have these type of activities can actually also help with this as well. And so that's a really important thing, especially in a previous episode we talked about electronics and this whole thing of how to manage it is also, these are other things that we want to see, is get that motion in.
Well, I'm sure like the big muscle, the hand-eye coordination. I would imagine that rock climbing would be an amazing thing for that. Like,
oh, it's huge, and also so I'm gonna geek out on this, but because you got me on a roll now. But like the climbing action is very similar to it's a cross crawl pattern, which is what we did when we were learning to walk. So crawling.
oh,
And so that stimulates tons and tons of neurological pathways, which can just be of great benefit for overall musculature tension, decreasing anxiety, helping with the spinal curvature. Because when we were crawling, that's when we were initially starting to form some of those curves in our spine, which are really, really important. So doing like rock climbing itself, hand-eye coordination, body awareness, proprioception, which is where we are in space, are all like just things that I think are great that you get with rock climbing specifically.
that's amazing. I didn't realize that I had all those benefits.
Yeah, that's my number one recommendation for most people is, if they're looking for a new activity, is to try rock climbing, because there's just so much that goes into it.
What about like because some people are scared of heights. Is that like?
Oh, I'm scared of heights. Yeah.
Oh, but you're I mean, you're tethered. You're tethered, right?
I'm tethered. Yeah. So there's a couple of different types. You could boulder, which is like essentially 12 feet, and there's no ropes, but like super, there's like what's called like crash pads. So like when you do come down, there's big thick padding, so you're generally fine. Like you're not gonna hurt yourself.
Yeah.
But when you're going way higher up, then yeah, you have a rope. You're all secured in, so it's actually like relatively like a fairly safe activity. The likelihood that you're going to get injured, or if you do get injured, is not from a fall. It's from like maybe some sort of technique, like with your hands, where you're gripping for too long, or you're using poor form, where you could injure like a ligament.
Okay, that's
So,
very cool.
yeah.
I might have to try that and see what, you know.
If you
Listen, I saw the video of you walking a little rope recently, and I'm like, that rope is literally 6 inches off the floor. I will need a little crash pad because I will fall.
Well, there's crash pads on either side of that, so it was perfect. I saw you mention that. You're like,
Yeah.
I need a pad.
I need a little pad, just even if it's that off, it's short off the ground, because you know some of us, like, our center of gravity, if we don't practice it, like, because that's why core work is so important, right? We need to have that balance. But we digress. We're completely out of. But it's a great skill to have and practice, and it really does just help your body in many ways.
It does,
So,
and with that, like we've been talking about anxiety and as well with ticks and how this can, like rock climbing specifically can help. A couple of weeks ago, we did a community building event for Basecamp, my chiropractic office, where we all went climbing. And the number of people that came up to me after and just talked, saying, I didn't think I could ever do this. I feel so empowered. I feel like I really can get in my body. I feel so relaxed that was one I was like, oh, you feel really relaxed after. That's really cool. So these are things that even if you may have some reservations or fears around heights or a certain thing, even just trying something and then having success, like how great is that?
And I wonder how many people, because they have certain kinds of tics that may be with motion or things like that they steer away from doing activities like that because they're scared that they won't be able to. When in fact they probably can participate in things like that and create a community, and it's that is not going to judge them because they have a tic, and that's that's a whole another psychological part of having tics. Is we talked about a little bit about embarrassment and nervousness around people, and trying to be able to understand what your tics are, how to manage them, and how, again, be mindful and intentional of yourself and people around you, so that you don't have to feel embarrassed, because that's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's just part of who you are, and that's okay. So I think the big thing is that we want to make sure that people are seeking help, that they are looking for resources, that they understand that there is a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of support. There's a lot of studies that show that chiropractic can absolutely help with that. Going to therapy and understanding yourself can absolutely help with that, and it help with coping skills. So making sure that if you have a tic, don't just say, oh, I have a tic. Absolutely go and find resources, because I think there's tons out there.
Yeah, I agree. Be proactive, advocate for yourself. If you need help understanding like ways to advocate for yourself, check out our episode, health advocacy. I think that's actually our first episode that we did, and that gives you great ways when you are going into to your primary care provider on strategies to talk with them. So all great. Well, like we have great resources, and there's great resources out in the community.
Yeah, and if you guys have more questions about this topic or any topic, make sure to send us a message. You can comment on our reels. We have TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. So go ahead and make comments, ask questions, and we're happy to address anything that we can, and we can send some resources if we don't have the exact answer. So I'm gonna try to gather all this information and summarize it. Is that cool?
That's cool. I think you already we're starting to.
We're starting to, yeah. So it's, I mean, this is such an incredible topic, and I think that there's so much more that we can talk about. But okay, so we understand that tics are kind of sudden repetitive motions. They can be verbal, they can be motion and non-rhythmic, they can impact daily life. They can cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of embarrassment, and they are typically associated with either an emotional response or something associated, primarily an issue with the nervous system. We can make sure that we find resources to help with that, because there is a lot of resources, but one of the resources we know is chiropractic can help with the spine and help in areas of the body that may alleviate some of the symptoms of tics. Is that fair?
Yeah, so definitely like with the spine, helping reset the nervous system to decrease anxiety. And that's not just like chiropractic isn't just the only one you can look at. You could look at like even like acupuncture would be a great one to take a look at if you're not like 100% comfortable with chiropractic care. So there are a lot of non-invasive things to start with on your journey of finding some help and management with
including some exercises.
Oh yeah, exercises. Yep.
Like rock climbing, which you absolutely love, and I'm gonna definitely give it a try.
We're gonna record that.
Oh boy. Okay, and so I think that in really being intentional and mindful about understanding that it's not behavioral necessarily for your kiddos, that that if you notice something, because there is 11 to 20% of children do demonstrate some sort of tic, and it is not behavioral. It's a nervous system thing. So, what do you think?
I think that's a good gathering, and lots of information in there for people to digest. And we appreciate everyone for listening and being on this journey with us, this little combo.
Yeah, and we appreciate you so much. Make sure to follow us and join us for next time with Painting Wellness.
Bye.